Lizmel, I'm going to post a video tonight about it officially. I want a meeting with Reed in the afternoon today. But I'll post a video tonight in the afternoon, so take a look for that. Lizmel was asking, do I have any additional information about the regions? I'm waiting for official confirmation, so let me just say that, and check the stream later tonight, and I'll post a video about it, and then we can have a discussion tomorrow if you guys have any questions or stuff. But let's just hold off one more period, and then I'll post something a little bit later after I officially talk to Reed. I kind of know what it's going to be at this point, but when you guys get jobs, you'll learn to not just say things until your bosses give you an okay. I think you'll learn that as you grow up a little bit. So that's where I'm at right now. I kind of know what the situation is, but I'm not going to officially say until I talk to my boss, basically. All right? But I think you guys will like the answer. All right. So focus question is, how did Richard Nixon, the 37th president, rise and fall as president of the United States? And he's an interesting president because I think he starts off pretty good and things start to get not so good. And we'll kind of talk about why. I think if you listened to the video yesterday, you saw a little bit about him already in terms of his situation with Vietnam. He does get the troops out of Vietnam. It does take him a little bit longer than a lot of people expected. But ultimately, he does get the troops out of Vietnam. And we'll talk about in a second how, a little bit later, like what that really means. He was responsible for the War Powers Act, which we looked at yesterday. Very, very important law, basically curtailing and making sure the president does not, basically the president can't wage war without Congress and without the United Nations. So you have 6 weeks to do what you got to do. If you can't win the war or win the conflict in 6 weeks, you got to get out of there unless a war is declared. And this becomes an important law when we start looking at some of the wars in the 90s and 2000s a little bit next week, where we're able to win those in less than 6 weeks when we don't really bring in too many troops in, which is good. He was very good about lessening the Cold War tensions. That's probably his biggest thing as president that he does well. You'll see how he's able to lessen the Cold War tensions. Bad things, you're not going to look at this too much because it's on the regions, but there was this thing called stagflation. So let me give you an example. So when the Great Society came out in the 1960s, there was a lot more spending that went on by the government. And what happened was when the government started spending a lot more money, that led to inflation and a big fancy term called stagflation. He was the president when that came out. When there's a new government program like the New Deal, like the Great Society, or maybe universal health care or paying for college, usually in the few years after that, the value of a dollar goes down a little bit. So he got hurt by that. So the economy in the early 1970s wasn't doing too good. And then by the late 1970s, after he's president, it's really bad. The economy's horrible in the late 70s. So this kind of starts the ball rolling with that. And without a doubt, his Watergate scandal is one of the worst scandals in American history. So we're going to take a look at that. But let's start with the good first. Let's start with the things he did pretty well and go from there. Just a couple of things here. He is shaking hands. It's the first time he's the first president to step into the Communist Soviet Union and Communist China. That's him meeting with the new prime minister of Soviet Union. His name's Leonid Brezhnev. This is them shaking hands. This is a very big moment in the 1970s. And then this is one of the, he would basically, when he was on the Watergate scandal and being accused of certain things, which you'll learn about, he would say he's not a crook. And well, we learned that to be not the case. All right. Let's look at detente. I'm not French, so I don't know how to exactly pronounce it. I've heard it both ways, but let's look at what this is. Detente. You may hear it both ways, so write this down. Okay, so throughout the Cold War, we've seen three foreign policies now: containment, domino theory, which we just learned yesterday, and now detent. Detent was the opposite approach between containment and domino theory. Remember, he was largely elected as president because of the disaster of Vietnam and the unhappiness. I think you guys saw that in the second period, the anti-Vietnam War movement. People were not happy with the Vietnam War. Were there people fine with it? Sure. But I think as a whole, the country was just not thrilled. So Richard Nixon kind of comes in and says, you know what, we need to not be as, crazy with the Cold War. We need to kind of ease tensions a little bit. And Nixon's first step in easing tensions of the Cold War was to send himself. This sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. He's going to send a ping pong team to communist China. He doesn't want to go to the Soviet Union first, which I guess is understandable. He's going to go to the country that we have a problem with, but not as much of a problem with. So we're going to send a ping pong team to communist China. Yes, ping pong. Okay. China was very good at ping pong. We were pretty good at ping pong. So they said, you know what, maybe sports is a good way we can, bring a little friendliness amongst one another. And anytime you see detente, it's a way where the United States tries to lessen Cold War problems. Okay, so we send our ping pong team out to communist China to try and get on better terms. Now, was ping pong really the important thing? No. When we went out there with the ping pong team, Richard Nixon followed to watch, right? And his advisors went out there to watch, but he really wasn't doing that. It was called ping pong diplomacy, as weird as that sounds. It was under the guise of he's really going to meet with the leaders of China to see how we can lessen some Cold War tensions. And there's some good videos of the people from America and China, the leaders, joking with one another. And this was an important thing for people to see that, yeah, we could be enemies, but you know what, we're trying to lessen that a little bit. So you don't have to know about the ping pong match, okay? I don't even know who wins, and I'm the history teacher, but ultimately we went there to try and ease Cold War tensions, and this was an important thing, okay? After that, he traveled to the Soviet Union. First time an American president traveled to the Soviet Union since the beginning of the Cold War, and they wanted to work on something called the SALT Treaty. SALT is an acronym for something which you're just about to learn, all right? But we have some Regents questions on detent and stuff that you guys might want to answer first. Does anyone need more time with this slide? It's probably the longest slide for today. I'll give everyone 5 more seconds. Oh, Sean needs time. Okay. Abigail, go ahead.
So, because of what you said, he was the first president to go to the Soviet Union, would he be considered like brave to do that or no?
Yeah, I think it was something where, you know, we were a little unsure of his safety a little bit, especially after JFK just got assassinated 10 years before that. So I think you could say it's brave. I think you could say it's, you know, also it's what his policy is. He's trying to work things out. You know, when you've been in, you know, a tense time for like 20 years now, people are getting a little sick and tired of it. So he's trying to lessen those tensions. And the only way to do that is to go to their country and for them to have their leaders come to us as well. All right, and we did do that. All right, I'm going to move on to the questions here. Be active in the chat. Oh. President Nixon's visit to the People's Republic of China in 1972 was significant because it what? Three is good. Okay, reduce tensions between the United States and Communist China, which is accurate. The policy of détente pursued by Richard Nixon was an effort to what? That one is also 3. Okay, so I remember my first year teaching it. There was a question on détente. Every single kid in the class got a question on détente right when they got to the Regents exam. I think it's a pretty weird word, so it's easy to remember. It's like laissez-faire a little bit. So it's one of those things that I think if you just see detent, you know, we're trying to lessen Cold War tensions and usually okay. All right, short slide here. This is called the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. Okay, so it gets the acronym of SALT. And there are a bunch of treaties that get put together here. Okay, do you remember the arms race that we looked at when we looked at the space race? Basically, it was a race to see how many weapons and who could have the biggest weapons within, Cold War. We now want to lessen the amount of strategic arms. Okay, those are the missiles that, not the nuclear bombs, but they're the weapons that are very strategic and used for wars, such as intermediate missiles or long-range missiles. We want to start limiting those. We're not saying the United States and the Soviet Union should get rid of them, but do we really need to have 4,000 of them? Could we maybe get by with a couple hundred? Because once a war breaks out, we have all these missiles. It's going to be the apocalypse sort of thing. So the way to avoid the apocalypse is to maybe have less weapons. The thing is, we don't want to have less weapons than the Soviet Union. Okay, we want to have the same, if not more. So the goal was we're going to both lessen the amount that we have together. So when he went to the Soviet Union, this was a big thing they were talking about. All right. It also established more trade between the U.S. and communist countries. Okay, remember, we did not trade with communist countries really at this time because of NATO. I think it was Maheen asked me yesterday, does it limit trade? We're not as willing to trade, but communist countries do want to trade. So yeah, we are more open to this now after the SALT treaties. It limited the amount of nuclear warheads and missiles each superpower had, and we got on the same number. So instead of us having 4,000 each, we had maybe 500 each, and it was a step in the right direction. We dismantled some, they dismantled some. We were able to go in and check. They were able to go in and check, and it just, again, trying to lessen the amount of tension. All right. Now, a big thing you learn about in world history, which I guess I should mention, is the Soviet Union in the 1970s really starts to take a little bit of a tumble economically. They really start to struggle economically. So a couple of historians would argue that America was almost doing the Soviets a favor here because they were struggling economically. And the problem, I guess you could say, in a communist country, if they're struggling economically, is everyone's struggling economically. In a capitalist society, if the country's struggling economically, there could still be individual people that are doing well. In a communist society, that's not really the case because everyone's kind of working together and getting things based on need. And if a lot of people are in need, that becomes a little bit of an issue. Okay? So things with the Cold War, Richard Nixon, were pretty good. Less tension, less drama, no worries about the, in 2 seconds, Anicia, we'll get into the Watergate scandal. Both the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of '63 and the Strategic Arm Limitations SALT of '72 were attempts to, again, I think you're getting used to the ideas now, and it also just keeps being the same number. I don't know why that happens. I should maybe go back and take a look at that, because it seems like it always happens the same number. But 3 is correct again. Ease Cold War tensions, okay, pretty basic stuff. So if it's Nixon and it's the Cold War, if it's the tent, it's all about lessening the Cold War drama that we have. Okay. Now let's go for this, because this is really where things start to take a tumble. I think if he was just president for one term, he'd be looked at as one of the better presidents. I'm not really sure. I wasn't alive at the time, but I would definitely say he did okay in his first term. It was the election of 1972 and the first year of his second term where things just take a huge tumble because of what's called the Watergate scandal. So take a minute and copy this down. There's another slide after this, but it's pretty short, so you're almost done. All right, so let me first ask you this question. Do you guys know what it means to be paranoid? I feel like a lot of you would know the word, but maybe not. All right. He is, Richard Nixon, the definition of paranoid. He was always very nervous. He was very nervous that he was going to lose election. He always kind of was worried that, you know, people were coming to take his power. So he's just a very paranoid individual. You know, people are like that. But when he was paranoid as president, he started to get worried about a lot of different things that were a little bit out of his control. So let me set up the scenario a little bit. So I first should mention, 1972, he wins in a landslide. Okay, he wins by like 100 electoral votes. So he's in pretty good shape. In fact, let me get the number here just so I'm accurate. Electoral. Okay, he wins more than 100. He gets 520 electoral votes. The guy he ran against got 17. So we would call that a dramatic landslide. Only Ronald Reagan ever had more of a landslide, which he comes a little bit later. Okay, so he didn't have much to worry about when he wins that big. But during the campaign, he was so nervous he was going to lose. And you're going to see this tomorrow when you look at some of the Supreme Court cases related to Richard Nixon. He was so worried that he was going to lose. He hired, though it wasn't him, it was his campaign. He basically told people to go get more information about his opponents. And this is at the Democratic Party headquarters. So Nixon's a Republican. He's running against the Democratic Party. So he wants to get some more information. So during Nixon's campaign, there's going to be 5 burglars that were going to be caught sneaking around the headquarters at the Watergate Hotel looking for information to help Nixon. Okay? And as I just mentioned, he didn't need it. He was going to win in a landslide. Okay? But he was paranoid thinking he was going to lose, so this happened. Now, was this bad? Yes. This is, but he makes a big, big mistake here, and you're not writing this down, but I need to say this. At first, he and the White House stated they had nothing to do with it. Now, when you make a statement like that, nothing to do with it, that's a little bit of a problem because you better have nothing to do with it. If Nixon knew about it and didn't say anything, if Nixon orchestrated it, if someone under Nixon did something related to it and they find out about it, well, now that's a big issue. Okay, and that's a big scandal. So even though at first he says he doesn't have anything to do with it, people go along with it, he gets elected. But as information starts to come out in 1973 and in 1974, people start to realize Nixon definitely had something to do with it. So let's go into our last slide here. Okay, you're looking, you will see a Supreme Court case, but we're going to do that tomorrow. So don't worry about that for now. All right, copy down the last slide here. Rosemary, if no one does, I'll go back to it in a little bit. Thanks, Lena. Oh, thanks, Anicia. Let me click on it. Let's see. Have I seen this video?
Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon.
I have not seen it, but maybe I'll take a look. I got actually a pretty slow day today, so maybe I'll brush up on my Watergate scandal history. All right, so I appreciate you sharing that. So in 1973, now, am I oversimplifying the scandal? Yes. I think you'll just kind of get the sense that it's a pretty simple situation. Nixon pretty much did have something to do with the burglary and pretty much lied about it. I think you guys can understand that's not something the president should be doing. So when they started investigating, and you can go into the details of the investigation, we'll do it in a little bit. The Senate basically held hearings, okay, and they were investigating Richard Nixon, which is pretty normal. And they learned that Nixon had kept privately recorded videotapes, or audio tapes, I shouldn't say. I should probably change that to audio tapes. I apologize. There's not videotapes. There's no video of it, but there's audio tapes. Okay. Of his conversations with the burglars. All right. Now, we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but I should mention it today. The president has the power in our country known as executive privilege. Okay, it's written into our Constitution. And basically, there's information that the president is allowed to withhold from the public. Okay, that is of matters of national security or of importance. So if like there's a big threat, okay, or if there's something that can endanger the public, all right, or is something that could worry people, they have executive privilege sometime to withhold that information. There's other things that they could also just not mention. It's known as executive privilege, okay? However, okay, if there's an investigation, if there's a criminal investigation, which this is, you're not really allowed to withhold information anymore, okay? We sometimes know this as obstruction of justice. So if you were, accused of a crime, and the investigators come in and you go try and hide evidence, okay, or if you lie or you don't say something you're supposed to, you're supposed to say in court, that is known as obstruction of justice, okay, and that is a crime. So the president, he's the president, but he's not above the law, so to speak, so he can't obstruct justice at any point. Okay, now this is the issue. When he handed the tapes over, ready for this? There's about 13 minutes of it missing. Okay? Now, let me explain something. Richard Nixon was paranoid. So his paranoia goes back to really bite him in the butt here. Every conversation ever held in the White House, he had an audio recording of. Okay? So this was pretty well known. So even this conversation he had with the burglars in the White House, okay, people knew there was an audio recording of it. And basically when he handed the tapes over, 13 minutes of it were missing, and people were able to determine, well, why are those 13 minutes missing? What's going on there? And once he handed the tapes over, he still kind of denied it, but then it started to really come out that he's going to be impeached for this. Okay? Good question, Abigail. I don't think the audio recordings have ever been found. Okay, Nixon burned the tapes basically. All right. So we have the other audio recordings, but not the 13 minutes that were important. All right. So everyone go to the assignment today, just for the timeline. All right, just so you can kind of get a sense of what's going on. Now, this is going to be a little tough to follow, okay, because there's going to be a lot of names and people. It's not too much of a thing. But I think it's important just to kind of go through the timeline from 1972 to eventually 1974. All right. There are going to be, when you get to the assignment, just so you hear this, there's going to be questions on the right here. You don't have to do these. Okay. You don't have to do these. You're going to have to do something else at the bottom. Okay. So just look here. June 17th, 1972, 5 masked men break into the Democratic Party at the Watergate Hotel. They are caught and arrested. Okay. 6 months later, James McCord testifies in court that he lied under oath to protect the president and that members of the Nixon administration were involved in the crime. So when this person lies under oath, commits perjury to basically cover up for the president and his administration, this becomes a bigger scandal. Okay, now I'm willing to say this. If Nixon just admitted that, yes, he had talked to, admitted to the wrongdoing in the beginning, he never gets impeached. He never gets resigned. He never resigns. because he tried to cover it up, that's where it became a bigger issue. So like if you ever get caught in a lie, my best advice is, not even just as a history teacher, is just fess up to it. Because if you cover it up and then you're found to be covering it up, it's like 10 times worse. All right. April 30th, 1973, Nixon fires John Dean and announces the resignation of Haldeman and Ehrlichman. He also announces the appointment of new Attorney General Elliot Richardson and Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. So these two people here were supposed to investigate the president for the Watergate scandal. That's what Archibald Cox did, and that's what Elliot Richardson was supposed to do. Okay? The Senate subcommittee begin hearings on Watergate, so they start investigating as a Congress. White House aide Alexander Butterfield informs the Senate subcommittee of the existence of the Nixon tape. So when Butterfield gets put onto the Senate floor and he gets asked the question, if he lies, he commits perjury. So when he gets asked the question if there are tapes, he has to say yes, otherwise he's going to get thrown in jail. Attorney General Elliot Richardson resigns rather than fire Archibald Cox, and then this is where things get to start bad. Nixon fires the guy that's going to be investigating him, basically. That looks corrupt. That looks bad. Because if someone's supposed to be investigating you and you have the power to fire them, that's a problem. All right? The Supreme Court rules, you'll learn about this tomorrow, that Nixon must hand over his tapes to investigators. The tapes contain gaps of erased conversation, including an 18-minute gap. I said 13, it's 18. I apologize about that. The House Judiciary Committee approves the 3 articles of impeachment for President Nixon. One of them was the big charge that he was given was obstruction of justice. And he has to go on trial for that and could be removed as president. Before he could ever be removed 2 weeks later, he decides to resign. Okay? So he was about to be put on... So Liz Mel, the hotel was just called the Watergate Hotel. Okay? And since this was like the biggest American presidential scandal, okay, we just happen to put the word gate at the end of it whenever there's another scandal. Okay? It's not because it's Watergate. It was just called the Watergate Hotel, so now every scandal has gate at the end of it. So like in the NFL, there was Deflategate. I don't know what other ones. I can't think of any ones off the top of my head, but yeah, there's always a gate at the end of it. Pizzagate, yeah. All right, that's another one, a conspiracy scandal, right? It's just because of Watergate so popular, people follow along with that sort of thing. All right, so just to summarize, firing his person that was investigating him, not good. Lying, obstructing of justice, like all these things are not good. And pretty much, even though he was elected in an electoral landslide, he is pretty much not going to be in good water here. And what he's going to decide to do instead of being the first president to be ever impeached and removed, he decides to resign. Okay, because understand, if he gets impeached and removed, he's going to jail too. All right, so he decides to resign before probably any of that can happen. Okay, now, we're going to talk a little bit about that later and when he resigns and eventually how he's going to be pardoned by Gerald Ford. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. What I want us to do is I want to do a little political cartoon practice. Okay, so you have political cartoon on Richard Nixon here with 4 questions. You have a DBQ document here, okay, with 4 questions. And then you have another DBQ document here with 4 questions. They're not like our DBQ documents where we restate and quote. These are just like regular questions and answers. So you're going to be working on these, okay? And then as you're doing that, you're going to be answering the questions on the document sheet here. All right, so clearly you can see the rise of Richard Nixon and the fall, and he fell pretty darn hard, okay, unfortunately. All right. Very quickly, you should mention you have your test Friday. Your test Friday is going to be on Unit 7. It's going to be 50 questions, multiple choice. I shared with you the 2 PowerPoints if you want to go back. I shared with you the quizzes, though you probably shouldn't do that till Wednesday or Thursday. And again, you won't know it's on it. That's just how the 4th marking period goes, sort of thing. All right, so that's what you're doing for the next 10 minutes, just working on the Nixon and Watergate stuff. Okay, Rena, yeah, I saw that she left, so I figured that was the case. And again, you are not answering the questions here on the right. Okay, don't worry about them. Just answer the documents here. That's all you have to do. All right, I'll be here. Let me know if you have any questions.